Salut tout le monde. Hey everybody. All right, we are here at the end of, unfortunately, at the end of the series of the Jets and Avalanche series. We have our excellent guest, TJ. He'll be here to kind of give us a little bit of an aperçu of what happens next, what went wrong, all that fun stuff. And we'll yell at some players, we'll yell at some coaches, and we'll do it all from the comfort of our couch. Well, my computer desk. If you have any suggestions, don't forget to throw it in the chat, like and subscribe, all that fun stuff. Before we get going, quick message from my boss, Andrew Berkshire, just to give you an idea. So this is game over. This is a soft launch during the playoffs, and then we're going to come back in full force next season. So quick message from Andrew.
Game Over Winnipeg is broadcasting from the Game Over Network channel for right now during the playoffs. However, in October, the network relaunches for real, and Game Over Winnipeg gets its own channel. So for all of your Winnipeg Jets content, fun, news, and analysis, head on over to the Game Over Winnipeg channel from the Game Over Network channel. Open it in a new tab right now, scroll past my ugly mug, all the way down, and click on the Winnipeg channel from our featured channels section. Click subscribe, and make sure you hit that reminder bell so that you get notified whenever we post a video or go live. Tell all your Jets fan friends and family to come check out our awesome community. We promise they won't regret it. And make sure on this video you smash that like button right into oblivion.
All right. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks for that, for the totally natural feeling ad there. I always hate those when you write them up. You're like, okay, I'm going to go 30 seconds, but then it starts to go long and you're like, oh man, this doesn't feel great. And that's kind of what the Jets felt like today. I thought, TJ, honestly, I really thought that they had a handle on things there. They were looking pretty good. Again, first two periods. What happened there? What happened when the Avs just, as soon as they pulled away, you could feel that was it? What went wrong?
Yeah, I think that you've kind of said it best through your Twitter over the course of the later half of the season and into the playoffs, and you've said it about Nathan MacKinnon. It kind of goes for the entire Colorado Avalanche team. They're just inevitable, and that seems to be kind of what happened. You get an ideal start to the game by, just kind of a scrum play in front of the net. Kyle Connor bangs one in from underneath the goal line on the first shot of the game. The place is rocking. You have a lead that, you haven't really had the enjoyment of having the entire series. And then all of a sudden shots are 7-2 for Colorado. You weather that storm. Colorado's first line yet again makes you pay on the Nichushkin goal, which is just a fantastic feed from Devon Toews, who had an incredible series. I mean, most of their defensive core did, but I thought Devon Toews really did, for a guy not being named Cale Makar. But you're still able to go into intermission at 1-1. I thought they played really well in the second. I thought that their first 40 was the strongest that they've looked all playoffs. They were controlling play. They weren't taking penalties. They weren't getting hemmed into their own zone. Colin Miller, another guy that I thought looked really well. And a guy with 40 playoff games in his career that maybe you ask why he wasn't in there sooner.
I saw a lot of that on Twitter. I saw a lot of people being like, hey, like fans from other franchises being like, hey, why wasn't Colin Miller here the whole time?
And I'm sure we'll, dovetail into that a little bit later as well in terms of like kind of roster adjustments and how players were utilized. I think that was one of the glaring weaknesses and kind of goes into what happened later in the second into the third period, where they're still in the game. They're maybe chasing it a bit more. They get behind 2-1. They tie it back up. Josh Morrissey, I thought, had a fantastic series. We talked about him on Friday night, right? And then into the third, they at home have decided that they were going to hard match their third line of Lowry, Appleton, and Niederreiter against the MacKinnon line. It hadn't worked yet again tonight at home, and then you saw it finally rear its head in the third period. They went from having Toffoli on the fourth line back up to the second line. He ends up scoring the tying goal to make it 3-3, but they made some decisions down the stretch that ultimately led to their demise. Mikko Rantanen, who had been quiet for the majority of the series in terms of goal scoring, scores 2. And
His first two
and that
chances
first
of the series, basically. And
Yeah, and I mean, like for as much as Nichushkin did, I think he had 7 in the series. Mikko Rantanen kind of was able to lay in the weeds alongside Nichushkin and McKinnon, and then all of a sudden scores 2 big goals, the go-ahead goal, the insurance goal, and after it became 5-3, you could feel the sag in the building. The fans were out of it. The
yeah,
team kind of even felt despondent. There was videos on YouTube or on Twitter of um, a late period, a late break in the action where they went to commercial, and all the Colorado players were kind of huddled up and going over tactic and going over
and
what the game
Winnipeg
script
was
would be.
yard stare. Or...
Yeah, 1,000 yard stare and Halibut standing at the end of the bench. So, I mean, if you want to go over it, kind of really the surface level of it, it was way too much versus not enough. And Colorado was just wave after wave again, like we talked about on Friday. And Winnipeg never had the answer when it came down to it. Also, credit to Colorado.
Yeah,
Their killer instinct from game 2 onward was there throughout, and Winnipeg never had that. Even when the small times when they had Colorado on the ropes, there
yeah.
was never that dagger, that killer edge that we're going to make you pay for it. It was always kind of it was as if they found it as though they shouldn't be in that moment, right? Like it was too big for them.
So, 'cause when you look at it, Kate, this is the first time in NHL history, not to make your night worse, TJ. The Jets are the first team in NHL history to allow 5 goals in each of the first 5 games in the postseason. Okay, Connor Hellebuck's going to go pick up a Vizina award this summer with that in his mind. But I look at this, and yeah, Connor Hellebuck wasn't great by all means, and I know I'm a goalie defender. Either I'm trading them or I'm a defender. But I wasn't a good skater when I was young, so I was a goalie. I have a little bit more, empathy for them. I'd argue that it wasn't necessarily Connor Hellebuck's. It wasn't his failure. I'd say perhaps the defensive structure had a little more to do with it than Hellebuck itself.
Yeah, I would concur with that. And like even tonight, when I felt that they were maybe playing a little bit more sound, it's kind of the microcosm or maybe the macro at that point of like an entire series of like how things are going
When
that maybe
Pionka,
you get it. Yeah, and you get in your own head a little bit, right? Of like, okay, well, I have to be so buttoned up because we're
yep,
not getting the scoring chances in terms of the Jets that maybe we need to be in this game. Maybe you put a little more on your plate to be like, I have to be super sharp. I have to make this next save. And to your point, like, the own goal, I chuckled because I'd never seen this before. I went onto the NHL website to look at kind of some of the game center information, and they had it marked as an own goal. And I'm like,
I
I've never
saw
seen
that.
that
I
before.
saw that both of the yeah. They had that's. I love that personally, but you have
Yeah,
to
and I mean,
you have to put the other
truthfully,
guy's name beside own goal.
yeah, and again, we kind of talked about him on Friday night. For as much as I'd just like to tear into him, I know that it's been a tough year for Neil. I know that he's lost a fair amount of foot speed with injuries from last year and the year before. But you're a guy making $5.8 million with a
Hmm.
year left on your contract.
Yeah.
This might have been a good opportunity for you to show that value. Instead, I thought that outside of Logan Stanley on the blue line, he was the most glaring weakness there against a team that was putting Jack Johnson out there, who is panned as maybe one of the NHL's current worst defenders in terms of what happens when he's on the ice in their own zone, and they were making Jack Johnson look more than passable.
Yeah.
So it again, it's one of those things that nothing seemed to be clicking at the same time. You saw it maybe a little bit in spurts, but I don't think that anybody on that team believed it. And not to the same degree of like the Leafs where they're yelling at each other and Marner's throwing his gloves and making a big scene. But, you know, anytime that a certain player might be out there or a certain line might be out there, there was certainly distrust in terms of like,
Yeah.
what the outcome was going to be. It was never like, okay, well, we're going to get this back or we're going to take the lead. There was just a feel from the whole team that it was going through the motions. It was last year all over again. It was the Blues in 19 all over again. It was the Montreal series in the bubble all over again. Just a team that was maybe a bit resigned to the fact that, like, hey, this is our fate. Let's just go to the guillotine and take our lumps here.
And that brings us pretty much to, because as we mentioned here in the chat, we have Brandon Cormier saying playoffs are way different than regular season. Avs are a playoff team, and it's so hard to quantify that, but it's absolutely true. They are that team that will make you pay if you make a mistake. And then they got the Jets playing nervous. When you're already behind in the series and you have to play perfect, it's essentially a recipe for failure in hockey, right? So that brings us to the next step, and we can talk about the series a little bit more, but for now, you have to reload if you're the Winnipeg Jets, don't you, TJ? Or am I just assuming that Connor Hellebuck, I look back at the Habs and I think they're kind of in the same situation as the Habs were with Carey Price. You got your goalie who's dragging you to the playoffs, but then you don't quite have enough to make it once you're in the playoffs. Where do you go from here if you're Winnipeg? Do you reload, or do you actually think about making wholesale changes?
Well, you raise a fantastic point, and you raise a long-winded answer. So I apologize going into this, but I want to give you kind of the nuts and bolts of it. So,
Absolutely.
You come out of game 4 and you have a head coach that said, or you have an assistant or alternate captain, Mark Scheifele, and a leader on your team saying, hey, look, they're making adjustments and we're not making adjustments.
You just
And
mentioned
when
that in the
asked
chat.
about it
Yeah.
again,
Yeah.
yeah, and when asked about it again, doubled down on that and said, they're making adjustments, we're not making adjustments. The question is then posed to their head coach, who says, if you want an adjustment, stay out of the penalty box, which is good and fine. I don't disagree with that. Having said that, the guy who led your team in penalty minutes was a defenseman by the name of Logan Stanley, who you championed to be in the lineup over a guy like Colin Miller from game 1 onward.
Yeah.
It took multiple injuries to your back end, and then the fact that he essentially took 2 boneheaded penalties in game 4 that led to a goal against, that led to the game running away on you, to finally say, okay, well, we're going to get Colin Miller in there. So there's certainly a rift there between your players, maybe your leadership group and your head coach. Like you have said in our Friday chat, like Rick Bowness is more of that old school coach. He's more of that, we're going to get pucks deep. We're going to forecheck.
This is a guy that was, in the league before about 8 other teams that are in the league now. He was coaching like pre-Columbus expansion, pre-San Jose expansion. This guy's been around for a long. I never saw him as innovative. I honestly feel, between you and me, TJ, he's been writing a little bit Connor Hellebuck's coattails to decency.
Certainly, and I think that you can kind of make that case with every Winnipeg Jets coach dating back to Claude Noel.
Well, yeah, that's what I was just starting to think. Is it a pattern here? But it is the same thing with Paul Maurice, right? Essentially,
yeah. So and all of a sudden, like if you look at Paul, and he has a slower plotting team there in Florida, similar to Winnipeg, but he also has a goalie right now that is making many more saves above expected than Winnipeg is right now. So you're right. I think that it's one of those things that you want to play defensive hockey, which is well and good, until your goalie lets in 4, whether they're his fault or not. You need to have some kind of response. It didn't seem like it was there. At the same time, not to lay this all at Bonus's feet, a lot of times in media, Mark Scheifele would say things like, not to the extent of, I don't like playing with Nick Ehlers, but Nick Ehlers is an unpredictable player, which to me, I don't mind, because I think that being predictable leads a team to being able to defend you better. So there were a lot of things internally that this team wanted, that they were vocal about, of who they wanted to play with, what their lineups wanted to look like. And you just saw them get boat raced in 5 games. It's just that one game they managed to score 7 out of maybe sheer luck. And so there's maybe some comeuppance there of like, look, everybody on this team asked for this. This is what you got. Back-to-back years of it not working. we have to maybe address where we're going. And maybe that isn't a Nick Ehlers player in terms of like what the core group want. Maybe that means moving Kyle Connor down. Maybe that means moving Kyle Connor out because it's kind of shown over time that Connor and Scheifele, no matter how much they want to play together, struggle at 5-on-5 to generate play and struggle together defensively in their own zone. So it's going to be a difficult summer here. There are a lot of questions to be answered. That they have a number of unrestricted free agents in Tyler Toffoli, in Sean Monahan.
I don't think I was going to bring that up later, but let's be honest, real quick. They were disappointments in the playoffs, right? And they had decent underlying numbers, but they had those two ex-Habs had to be better.
Well, and so another guy that we never talked about on Friday, you may disagree, and that's okay. I thought that Casey Middlestad for Colorado had an exceptionally good series and outplayed Pig's second line, though they weren't matched.
Him and Lehkonen were great.
Him and Lehkonen and Parise outplayed Winnipeg's second line. Winnipeg's second line looked like they were stuck.
Maybe game 3, I'd say maybe they had but they weren't scoring when they had the advantage. So that's the difference, right?
Right. And you know, we didn't really get into it on Friday when we discussed it, but the difficulty about waiting to make certain changes and adjustments is that you run out of racetrack.
Yep.
And all of a sudden you play your best game in game 5 or your most cohesive game. You gave up the 6th goal to an empty net, but up until about like the 15-minute mark in the third period, it wasn't a shootout. It was still a close game. Mm-hmm. But these are things that you needed, chess moves that maybe you needed to make in game 3, certainly in game 4, as opposed to, you know, we're going to keep riding the hand that we've had. And we've seen the highest of highs from this Winnipeg Jets team this year, to the tune of like their December and January, where they were at one point the best team in the NHL. Yep. We've also seen the lowest of lows in like a 6-game losing streak, an 8-game losing streak. And through it all, it's been like, well, just steady the course, just keep doing the same things, which over 82 games, I understand and can understand why you would want to do that. Mm-hmm. In a best of 7 series, time is imperative to you. And Absolutely. They were just slow to make those adjustments. They were slow to make those moves. The players aren't absolved of any of it. Like the back check today looked as good as it's looked all series, to where you ask yourself where that was games 1 through 4. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there's going to be some hard questions that need to be answered here, from ownership, and from an ownership that has seen season ticket decline and are trying their best to get fans into the arena for the regular season. To essentially have a redux of last playoffs, in where, again, uncompetitive is a very, very strong term, and I don't like using it, but you know, you can't give up that many goals in a series and be competitive. So now what, right? Now that's what they'll have to figure out. And to say that it's unprecedented, it's not. They had a tough summer last year. Apparently, Mark Scheifele and Connor Hellebuck were both out the door. They were going to have to lose. That's what I heard.
I heard that it was game over there. That it was you're restarting everything in Winnipeg, and it was like to the point that the media were about to tweet about it. Everyone was saying like it's the end of the empire, and I feel
they
like
were blowing everything up, right, Mark? Yeah. So to me, like, I want to take a silver lining approach of like, look, they still had a 110-point season. This is still a good team with underlying metrics. In the playoffs, you're right. It's a different animal. They need to be able to figure to flip that switch. And if they don't have the dogs on the roster, they have to go find them by some way, shape, or form. But to say that like, well, it's all over and they need to, you know, make all these sweeping changes, they probably need a new head coach at this point.
Do you think that even Rick Bowness would want to come back? I know that like at one point, I feel like today pre-game that was good. We saw last year, I felt that he was very defeatist in his attitude and kind of just, you know, pushed the buck a little bit down further and said it was all in the players. This year, I liked what he said pre-game. You know, it's like it's not going to be a lack of effort, but eventually, you know, you need to, as Dustin mentioned in the chat. What was it? It was Velarde that had to for Perfetti to get in. Was it? It was who got injured?
No, Nemesnikov.
Yeah, Vladimir Nemesnikov. Yeah, exactly. So I feel like you're at odds with your coach. The adjustments are an issue, but if we go back to what we mentioned about 2 segments ago, there is one common denominator in all these issues, and it's Mark Scheifele.
Yeah.
But now you look back, and I'm not trying to say that you have to get rid of him, but you also look, and the guy that produces, the guy that shows up every time is Mark Scheifele, right? So I don't think you can move on from a guy like that. So next coach, there's guys talking about Jay Pandolfo in the chat. He's a Boston University, did a great job there. Dustin Olson saying they're going to bring back Tom Watt. But who do you look for right now? You know, there are some pretty decent coaches that got thrown away. There's that recycling program. Who would you look for? In Winnipeg that would really kind of fit the mold of the players.
Right. So, and you had kind of made mention too of like, look, does Rick Bowness want to come back? So let's address that, because I don't necessarily know that he will.
Yeah.
He's a head coach that is in his early 70s. It's a team option essentially for whether or not he comes back or they move in another direction.
So he's not coming back.
Yeah, and I mean, like, he had health concerns this year. He had health concerns last year that kept him out. His wife had health concerns as well, where he had to step away from the team back in November. So, like, again, similar to Neil Pionk, like, I have no ill will towards Rick Bowness. I thought that he had a very difficult year personally in terms of the things that were laid at his feet, and he did the best with it. And so did Scott Arniel, filling in when Rick wasn't able to be there.
I'm really glad you're mentioning that, because that actually I didn't know that from being out of market. Yes. So that's very important information.
So yeah, it's one of those things where, you know, a lot of things went wrong, and early on in the season, especially when Rick's wife was diagnosed with the stroke, and they didn't know how long he was going to be away, and it was in late October, early November. It could have gone a multitude of ways, but they steadied the ship. They played as they lost Velarde during that time too, and they just found a way to make it work. And they just, like, to me, that's my proudest moment of this team this year, is the fact that early on things went against them, and they said, you know what, we don't give a shit. We're just going to go out and we're going to play our best hockey and let the chips fall where they may. And they did. They played extremely good hockey up until the January All-Star break. So will Rick want to come back? There might be two things. Number one, Rick's personal life, which we've just alluded to, and his age and where he is with his contract. Number two, you know, whether or not management, in terms of your general manager, wants him back. But at the same time, how many coaches can your general manager go through before it falls at his feet, right? So you look at a guy like Colin Miller, and like, why you go out and get him if he's not going to play playoff minutes, despite the fact he's played 40 NHL playoff games, and the guy you're sitting him for has played 8. You look at Cole Perfetti, who's a 19-goal scorer, which we talked about on Friday, who all of a sudden comes into the lineup, played one shift in the third period tonight in a 3-3 game. And it's just like, you know, do they want him back at that point? Who might be a good fit? Like, I mean, I'm going to shoot for the moon at a guy that I would love to have here, and that's David Carl of the University of Denver.
Yeah.
He's a younger coach. Like, I think that
he just did such an amazing job in the NCAA this year. Like in the Frozen Four, he was out coaching the best coaches, well, from Boston essentially, right? So yeah, Denver was amazing. Yeah.
Made BU look silly. Made Michigan, whom you know, a lot of top end prospects played there this year, including Recker McGroarty from Winnipeg. Yeah, great name. I'm gonna have a lot of fun with that one. But you know, like, just a really good coach, a younger coach. I think that I know that a lot of teams are looking for that nowadays. Yeah. Like a younger coach that maybe speaks to the players a bit more. Here in Winnipeg, I think that's what they need. Like, especially in a fishbowl where, you know, every time you're out in public, people are watching you, people are taking notes, people are writing on Reddit, you know, what stores you shop at. I can understand and empathize with the player. Why?
Wait, hold on. People are like, live perving on the on people on Reddit? Is
I mean,
that
not maybe not to that degree, but like
no.
certainly it's a small town and it's two
Yeah,
degrees of separation everywhere, right? So
yeah,
I can understand why coming to a city like Winnipeg, being a smaller market to begin with, is difficult for a player that is going to be under the microscope
definitely.
um, when they're on the ice, and
Mhm.
then what they're doing off the ice might be used against them when they're not performing on the ice. So I think that, yeah, a younger coach, somebody that gets them, somebody that can just keep them even keeled and relaxed. Like we go back again to our conversation on Friday. We talked about how Colorado was unfazed. Winnipeg played their best 40 minutes tonight in game five, periods 1 and 2. They still remained unfazed. Like it was never like yakety sacks out there in their own zone. They never had, game one, they had Casey Middlestad making some mistakes. They had Jack Johnson making some mistakes,
Mhm.
coughing pucks up in the high danger zone. They didn't have that tonight, even when Winnipeg was carrying the play. So I think that Winnipeg, then it becomes a bit of that self-fulfilling prophecy that I spoke of, where nothing's going right. Every time we make a mistake, it's going to end up in the back of our net. And maybe you just need a younger guy that can be like, hey, look, I empathize. Let's be empathetic here on the bench. But look, we got a job to go out there and do, and like let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah.
We might not win this game five tonight, but we're going to go out there giving them our best. And for roughly 50 minutes, I thought they did that. And then the last 10 minutes, it wasn't enough. It just wasn't enough.
We have about 8 minutes here, so we will wrap up roughly soon. I'll say, okay, so first of all, King of the North mentions Logan Stanley scored 2 goals in one of those Jets game versus the Habs, so we have to put a little bit more respect on Logan Stanley's name, apparently. Big Logan, no, King of the North, great. He's always in all of our shows, so. But I didn't remember that. I did not remember that Logan Stanley scored 2 goals. What game was that? Game one, game two? Or?
Are we absolutely positive it wasn't a fever dream?
Yeah, exactly.
Because it might have been a fever dream, Mark. I mean,
Very
I'm not going
strong
to say it didn't.
possibility.
I'm not going to say it didn't happen. It's just that the replicability of that, we might have better odds of
Right?
winning the lottery, the Powerball tomorrow. So,
We
yeah.
found a glitch there. Dustin Olson mentions, because you did briefly touch on Cheveldayoff. I actually thought Cheveldayoff made, the move to go get Monahan early. Listen, it was pretty much reactionary, but I liked it. I liked that. I didn't, listen, a late first is useless for Winnipeg. It's good for the Habs. Bringing in Toffoli, again, he should have done better. Guys like Nita Ryder should have done a little bit better. But he mentions here he has a tough time blaming Chevy this year because the Dubois trade was maybe the biggest fleecing in a long time. And I have to say, because I was on the other side of it looking at Kent Hughes was essentially saying, like, I'm not going to play your game here. But Cheveldayoff still made the Kings think that the game was being played. And that was an absolute robbery. So is that enough to keep him in the mix here moving forward, to get that management to be like, hey, man, he's making good deals. We just need to try one more time. Hey, the Washington Capitals failed 8 years in a row before winning the Stanley Cup, right? Like there is merit
Yeah.
to. It's so hard to win in the playoffs. That's the other part of it. We mentioned Avalanche are our playoff team, but it's so hard, even if you're that killer instinct team, to win. So the Cheveldayoff get like, if they meet tonight, do you think ownership's cool with what's happened and they're ready to go again?
Yeah. So I hope it didn't come off this way. But my hope would be that Kevin Cheveldayoff is here moving forward.
Yeah, no, I don't think it
Because,
came off as overly negative. No.
okay, because I mean, I think that, um, you know, even if you corner the nicest dog, they can show their fangs and they can bite. And I think that Kevin does that extremely well.
Hmm.
Um, there have been multiple scenarios, whether it was Jacob Trouba, whether it was Dustin Bufflin
Hmm.
announcing early retirement, whether it was having to navigate Blake Wheeler's aging, the Pierre-Luc Dubois being the cherry on top of a sundae. Anytime Cheveldayoff is painted into a corner of like, well, certainly he's boned here.
He comes
Certainly
out
there's no
swinging and he
getting
hits,
out
he
of it.
hits, ground run, RBIs. He's hitting RBIs every time he comes out swinging.
Well, like, I mean, I think you can ask any Winnipeg Jets fan, and they were like, "Hold on, wait, we're getting what for Pierre-Luc Dubois? We're getting Kupari and we're getting Iafallo. and we're getting
and
Velarde,
Yeah.
and we're getting a pick.
Yeah, and that
Like,
was actually
oh,
Montreal's second round pick, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
right. So, and I mean, like, I think the big part of that was him being like, I'm going to think outside the box. We retain his rights. We can get the extra year on this contract that
Yeah.
he can't get if we just trade him. So let's sign him to 8, give him the deal that they want, that the Kings want him at, and then that will appreciate the value coming back. I think he's made great trades. Even like you said, the Monahan trade, I think that while it was reactionary, a first round pick hurts less than a prospect that's already in your system. I think that the trade for Toffoli, like having the Devils retain
Oh, it
contract
was
and
great value
salary on
for a
that.
guy. Listen, Toffoli failed in the play, or didn't fail. I don't want to say that, but this guy's led his team in scoring for 3 years in a row, and his 3 different teams.
Right.
Like,
And almost set, I think he was a goal off tying or setting a career record for goals this year. Again, most of them being in New Jersey, but he
hmm,
had a stretch here where he
yeah.
looked good. And like you said, like the playoffs are to a certain degree, like everything's happening in a very confined space. And you can have one great game and 4 bad games. You can have 6 great games and then fall off. Nothing is guaranteed. And truthfully, I think that Winnipeg over the last 5 or 6 years have worked deftly enough within the salary cap, within aging stars and
Yeah,
bringing in new.
they've navigated it
Um,
very well.
so
It's a
I mean, to
minefield
me,
too. Like they're dealing with an absolute minefield every year.
yeah, and like Brian Little, they were able to get rid of his
Oh
contract when he
yeah,
was on
I still remember
LTIR.
the summer he signed that deal. Everyone signed. All the free agents were bad that year. Were terrible that year, and they all signed for about $6 million each. Yeah.
Well, and they got him in under, and then with his injury, they were able to move him off. So I mean, like again, he's done a lot of good things. I think that more than anything,
Mhm.
the draft and develop mantra here in Winnipeg is one that is going to have to work in terms for Winnipeg to stay successful.
Yeah.
They're always going to lag behind in terms of free agents. They're always going to lag behind in terms of stars that want to stay here that are the echelon above Mark Scheifele, who's a very, very good player, but he's not Nathan McKinnon. He is not like the elite of the NHL. So with that, yes, I think that Kevin's done an exceptional job. He's got Rutger McGroarty in the pipeline. He's got Colby Barlow in the pipeline, Brad Lambert and Nikita Kucherov, Nikita Chibrikov. My apologies. Both looked very good in with the Moose this year and in limited time with the Jets. So I think that he should be back. I think he's done enough to deserve to be back. My request would be, and again, this is me projecting as opposed to being in the room and knowing. I would have a hard time thinking that Kevin Cheveldayoff would be okay benching Cole Perfetti, certainly in games 3, 4 before going into game 5. Specifically when you go out and make trades to not move your
Yeah.
prospect, to keep them in house, you would think that, and I think we talked about it a bit on Friday as well. You see Wyatt Johnson, he scored again last night for Dallas. And it's just like this dude's 21 and they're giving him free reign and just letting him go.
He's like leading the team right now, and and you look just down Robertson, not too much older. You look in Montreal, there's 22-year-olds, 23-year-olds leading it. Yeah, there's
Right.
it's a new league, right? In terms of the, they always said it's not a development league. It kind of is at this point. You kind of have to take advantage of those contracts.
I think that certainly you do, and certainly when your goalie's about to be making 8.5 million next year, and
That's
Mark
where,
Scheifele's about to be making
yeah,
8.5 million, you're gonna need those
exactly.
frugal contracts or those inexpensive contracts to be
We've
playing.
got about
And
1 minute
yeah,
left, TJ.
okay, fair enough. But
So,
yeah, to
and
your
real quick,
point,
I want to mention it here. There's someone mentioned Jason Smith. Yeah, listen, we probably didn't give enough credit to Colorado, but they deserve a ton of credit. They were fantastic in this series. Like, they were a dominant team. So I'm going to give the last 30 seconds up to TJ here. Where can we find you, TJ? And closing thoughts on this series. You got about 30
yes.
seconds.
So again, credit to Colorado. They deserve to win. There was no doubt about it. They're going to go
By
deep
far the
into the
best team. Yeah,
playoffs.
yeah.
I think that whoever comes out of that Vegas Dallas series is going to be in big trouble. And kudos to them because everybody wrote them off for dead. They're far from it. They're an exceptional hockey team.
Mm-hmm.
You can find me on Twitter at TJ_Mon. That's MAUGHAN. And would love to talk hockey with you. We're going to have a long Jets off season,
Absolutely,
so feel
yeah.
free to.
And we're going to have plenty of episodes next year. We're going to get you on, TJ. Hey, that was great. We want to thank everyone in the chat. Like, subscribe before we get cut off here. But we'll be back in full force next year, every single Winnipeg's Jets game. Thank you to TJ. And thank you to everyone in Winnipeg, everyone in Colorado. It was a lot of fun. And we'll see you.